Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing you energy matters in an informal setting. In this week's pod, we return our attention to Europe's guarantee of origin market. For some, guarantees of origin, or GOs, are the most efficient way of verifying renewable electricity output, while others say the system is open to abuse and should be reformed. Prices for forward GOs have soared this year from around €1.50 at the start of the year to well over €7 this week. Helping me, Richard Sverrisson, to discuss the reasons why prices have skyrocketed and the outlook going forward are Adam White of Rex International and Leo Robert of Greenfact. A warm welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about the current market dynamics. Maybe if I turn to you, Leo. So we're at €7. I mean, a couple of years ago, this would have been unthinkable, really. Are we heading towards 8, or are we going to, screech back to sort of 5 or 6? What's your view?
Well, I wish I could tell you exactly where the prices are going at the moment. Everyone is kind of having this question burning their lips. But as you mentioned in the introduction, prices have soared a lot this year, and they pretty much doubled in the last 2 months as well. Now we're close to €8 for the 2022 production. The market activity is still quite blurry on our side at Greenfact, but what is certain is that this continuous rise has been developing for the past month, and since the start of the year, we're pretty much quadrupled the price since the beginning of the year, and we're heading towards the €8 mark, of course, amongst supply fears on our side, we see that pretty much nothing indicates that this trend will stop anytime soon, even though it's likely to break by the end of this year, at least for the 2022 production. But what we can imagine that this very positive and bullish trend will remain for quite some time.
So which guarantees of origin are we talking about here, Leo? Which ones in particular?
Yeah, well, when I mentioned the €8 per megawatt hour mark, I refer to what we call in the market the benchmark product, which is Nordic Hydro 2022. That is as of mid-November around 750 euro cents per megawatt hour. So this is the most liquid product that we know on the market, and this is why we use it as a benchmark for the price.
Absolutely. What could then trigger a price fall, in your view?
We know that there are certain fundamentals behind it that are pushing the price into a certain direction, right? And one of the big things and topics that were on discussion, especially after the summer, that we had quite some drought on the reservoir levels, and the hydro balances are subject to quite some tension, I would say, on both sides, demand and supply side. And now they're going back to more normal levels thanks to savings and the latest weather conditions, especially in the Nordic region and the Iberian Peninsula that was quite under some tension in the past few weeks. I would say that this gives positive signals to the market that pretty much the supply side will be well off in the next week. But again, this is still a bit blurry, and we're trying to see what can be expected in terms of supply by the end of the year, and it remains quite uncertain.
But this could maybe dampen the phenomenal price rise we've seen if the reservoir levels are returning to some degree of normality.
Potentially, at least it gives some good signal that we're not going to be too short this year. And given that Norway is the biggest issuer of GOs, and especially on hydro, of course, this gives quite a good signal for the market, I would say. But again, this is to take with some precaution because this is not the only variable that takes a big role here, and we want to look at the market on a global perspective and not only on reservoir levels. But yeah, of course, this gives quite a good signal.
Absolutely, Adam. If I can turn to you, I mean, now with when we were talking maybe a few years ago, where GO prices were languishing maybe under €1 or just over €1, it's quite a different situation now when they're close to €8. This makes the geo price quite significant in terms of incentivizing a renewable build and rollout of renewables facilities. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at you can look at the price of individual geos, obviously rising as Leo has described very clearly, and then the total volume of around a billion certificates. Then you're talking about a very valuable market suddenly for Europe that can really help to drive the energy transition. And obviously there are fluctuations in prices that it's not my expertise to discuss, but we do see that the general trend is for this value to hold because we see the market maturing as a whole, and we see a lot of demand coming into the market that is starting to really shorten the market, which is where you see this price rise and a much higher kind of equilibrium price than we've seen in previous years. So we do expect that to continue. The strength of the market to continue, and for this really to add kind of value to the ability for Europe to accelerate its energy transition. We obviously don't say that public support should be curtailed in any way, but you have to put on every lever we have to meet the targets both for renewable energy and total emissions reductions that Europe is setting and the world needs to set. So we see this as a very positive sign of a maturing market in Europe.
Leo, have other guarantees of origin, because you have a variety of different sources of renewables and non-renewables as well, for guarantees of origin. And what's happened to prices of say, for example, non-Nordic hydro? Have they also skyrocketed?
Yes, they did. Depends on the technology, but most of the prices have soared during this past year. We see quite high prices as well for EU hydro production, given what I've mentioned earlier, the very big fears on the reservoir levels in the Iberian Peninsula, and as well with very quite low and unexpected low reservoir levels in what we call the Central Western Europe region, that includes France, Germany, and a few other countries like Switzerland. But yeah, even on the EU solar, and that we've seen quite high prices with trades are at around 600 and 650 euro cents in the past few weeks. And what I'd like to mention is that amongst all technologies, like I've said, it increased by a lot, but not only for the 2022 production. This is quite interesting, is that at the same time, the 2023 and 2024 vintages, meaning the forward years production, have increased by quite a lot as well, meaning that market participants anticipate that either the supply is going to be short in the weeks, months, and years to come, or like Adam said, this market is quite valuable, and this includes a good raise in transactions and in volumes that are being traded, not only for this year's among supply fears, but also for forward years. And this is quite interesting and can be observed for pretty much all technologies. And as regard to non-renewable, perhaps which is like which are products that are not very very traded, or very low volumes, at least on the nuclear side, for example, they are still quite very very cheap compared to the renewables geos, but they are potentially being more traded in the month to come, especially as regard to the new European regulations and recognition of nuclear and so forth.
I think we'd like to stick to the renewable geos in this discussion. I think that's where the interest is. That's what's, as you said, Adam, that's what's driving the energy transition, or will drive the energy transition. So that's the important part of the discussion here. Adam, if I can turn to you, in recent weeks we saw some proposals coming from the RE100. Could you talk us through that? What they are, and why they are significant.
Yeah, sure. I think there's two rules that RE100 have brought in, for which are basically the requirements on RE100 companies on the kind of renewable energy that they can procure. So the first, and I think the most significant one, is that they have decided to set a 15-year age limit on the production devices that RE100 compliant renewable energy can be bought from at 15 years.
Sorry,
that
Adam, if I
means
could
that
just interject. So when we say RE100, for those listeners who may not be aware of what RE100 is, can you just briefly sort of explain what that is?
yeah, sure. So it's an organization that works with the CDP, and they set rules for corporates who want to buy renewable energy in the way they buy it and how they report on that. And so if you're an RE100 company, you kind of go above and beyond what might be the rules you set yourself for how you buy renewable energy, where you buy it from, and you comply with these RE100 rules. And these rules are starting to be tightened. We can see with this latest shift. Like I say, they're now going to bring in a rule that will start as of 2024, that any corporate buyer wanting to meet the RE100 guidelines, the RE100 criteria, will have to be buying from renewable energy production that is less than 15 years old. And the most obvious kind of difference that will draw is a lot of hydro production will drop out of being RE100 compliant, and it will shift the focus more towards newer wind and solar production. So that could have an effect in the market. Obviously, corporate buying is a significant part of the geo market, but it shouldn't be ignored that any households buying renewable energy are also part of the geo market. And obviously not buying the geos themselves, but their suppliers are having to cancel geos on their behalf. So that's the first big switch. The other is to have a clearer definition of what counts as a European single market for guarantees of origin. And the criteria there are that the country has to be in the European single market, it has to be an AIB member country, and it has to have a grid connection to another AIB member country. So that's a kind of a tighter definition of what the European single market is, and to be able to claim renewable energy that is RE100 compliant again, you have, with load in one of those countries, you have to have bought a geo from another European single market country, European country recognized within the RE100 market.
So again, we have an abbreviation here, AIB. Could you just say, briefly what that is as well,
Yeah,
Adam?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the association of the AIB is the Association of Issuing Bodies. It's the umbrella organization that represents the national issuing bodies who choose to join the AIB. It's a voluntary organization, but it covers, I think, now almost all but one or two of the European single market countries. Poland is a notable example of not being an AIB member country. And they come together. They discuss the best way of running the issuance and registry of guarantees of origin, and they apply what are called the EECS rules, the European Energy Certificate System rules, which is a kind of a more detailed rule book, certainly, for example, compared to the RED II, which has a very limited set of rules, the Renewable Energy Directive from the EU, a very limited set of rules on how guarantees of origin systems should be run.
We'll come back to the Renewable Energy Directive and the latest versions of that in a minute, Adam. But in the meantime, if I can turn to you, Leo, and ask you what do these rule changes mean for prices in the market? I mean, if you have suddenly, hydro, which is the benchmark here, certainly Norwegian hydro, if that's out of the market because it's older than 15 years, so certainly that withdraws a huge amount of supply and can only mean one thing for prices.
Yeah, definitely. Especially since we take into account that most of the Norwegian hydropower plants are older than 25 years. So we cannot really estimate how many geos will be taken out of this thanks to the new RE100 rules. But for sure, it will be quite a huge amount of geos that will be not being able to be purchased by this over 380 companies that have committed to go 100% renewable, as Adam mentioned. And yeah, of course. I mean, especially if we take at the latest price developments that were pretty much driven by a combination of quite a high demand and supply fears. If we increase these supply fears by these new rules, this will likely drive the market up. I mean, I don't see any other reason why this could be different. So. Again, this will have to be assessed in the month and years to come, because these new rules will be applied as of 2024. But yeah, we will see the market going up, especially on other technologies and than hydro, potentially solar and wind, of course, and in other regions than the Nordic regions. But that's yeah, we've already seen, like I've said, a very good raise on these products during the past year before the change in the RE 100 criteria. So now we're going to see potentially a new new price trends for this, and it will be interesting to follow the developments of these two products, like Nordic hydro production and the non-Nordic hydro production, or like EU specific wind and solar production in the month to come, thanks to these new rules.
Absolutely. What about the other aspect that Adam mentioned here? So that, the single market part of it, where you have to have a grid connection to another EU member state in order to export and import GOs. Will that have an impact?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, I think it's always a huge topic of discussion, this, and it will, it was during it was under the discussion for the past few weeks, and it's always important to have that thing in mind. And I think it's it's always something that we're forgetting when we think about market drivers, and definitely needs to be taken into account when assessing the prices. And we're clearly following that Greenfact amongst other market drivers. But yeah, definitely.
And back to you, Adam. So the Renewable Energy Directive, so a RED 2 it's called now, which is the latest version of it on the table. What are the latest proposals here? Could you talk us through some of those, and how likely are they to create some sort of change within the guarantees of origin market as we know it today?
Right, yeah. So currently we're in the RED 2, and the European institutions are negotiating what is going to be called the RED 3. The kickoff for making the changes to the RED 2 were the increase in the European targets for renewables, for energy efficiency, and for greenhouse gas emissions. So this was the kind of the Fit for 55 package. They increased the targets overall, and then they had to go back and revise all the directives, including the Renewable Energy Directive. So this was really a kind of a targets-focused exercise. Guarantees of origin are governed in Europe by Article 19 of the RED 2, and there was some small changes proposed initially by the European Commission. That's how this works. The Commission makes the first proposals, and they proposed, for example, issuing guarantees of origin to all renewable energy generation, whether it benefits from a public support scheme or not. Currently, member states are allowed not to issue guarantees of origin to renewables on their territory that benefit from public support. That proposal from the Commission seems, well, it's not guaranteed to go through. Let's say that there's definite resistance in the European Council, some particular member states, Germany being a big example, who don't currently issue guarantees of origin to publicly supported renewables generation, and weren't particularly in favor of it. Other countries maybe too. There are some more kind of progressive proposals from the European Parliament, as this is typically the case. The European Commission make a proposal somewhere in the middle. The Council tended to be more conservative, the Parliament more progressive, and there were some positive proposals there in the Parliament towards full disclosure, which is kind of the total transparency of the energy market, where any energy production receives a guarantee of origin. We see this in some countries already, and that's kind of Rex's big ask in general, is that all countries do, as for example the Netherlands does, and has total transparency. Austria and Switzerland also do this. But that seems unlikely to go through. What the most likely outcome is more or less status quo on Article 19. Like I said, it wasn't the focus of updating the RED 2 to the RED 3, and it seems our expected outcome of the trilogue process is more or less status quo. There's that's not a terrible thing in some ways. The market can continue as is. Those member states who want to go beyond just the kind of a basic geo system can do so. We already see that, like I said, in the Netherlands, with full disclosure there. The one kind of really sticking point that some of our the organizations we work with are focused on is the ability of member states to issue guarantees of origin at less than 1 megawatt hour. At the moment, it's fixed. It's a fixed volume, 1 megawatt hour per guarantee of origin, and that really limits what's called the 24/7 issuance or time-based issuance, where you issue more for a time window, either an hour or less, and the number of watts or kilowatts in that hour become the certificate or a version of a certificate. That would require a change in RED 2 that is still kind of up in the air. It's a possible change. It's something that the Parliament asked for. We're waiting to see a bit. These trilogue negotiations are always a bit of a black box. So that's the one thing that would have to change to facilitate 24/7 in Europe. For the rest of the market, status quo is the most likely outcome, I would say.
And what about, what's your view here on 24/7 tracking and issuance, Leo? Is that going to be an important driver for the market going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question is how granular do we want to go, right? And it's we're always talking about 24/7 tracking, but I think a monthly granularity would be good to start in the first place. And that also raised the question, or whether we will have a split between new and old certificates in the long run, right? We've seen that in the past years with a German label that is called Oki Power, that had a differentiation, between old and new plants, and of course the current system that we have needs to be more flexible, and maybe we should go towards more granularity. I'm not really sure whether 24/7 would be the good timestamp, but at least a monthly net granularity would be good for the market to provide more transparency for both wholesale buyers and also the end consumers. Definitely.
Absolutely. So, Adam, can you just tell us a little bit about how long, or where are the negotiations at the moment, and how long do you expect the negotiations to last, Adam?
Yeah, I think we're expecting a conclusion by the end of the year. They're in trilogue now. They've had a couple of rounds. It really depends, issue by issue, how entrenched either side is. Like I said, we don't expect guarantees of origin to be kind of the blocking, defining issue that ends up being discussed at 3:00 in the morning, as these things always end up some late night. They have to reach a deadline. But yeah, I think we would expect by the end of the year for it to be concluded. Certainly on the Renewable Energy Directive, there are other parts of the package that would also need to be concluded, and then the package as a whole can move forward. But for the RED 2 by the end of the year, and then there's always an implementation period and so on. So that's kind of the time frame we're looking at, and yeah, we'll find out at kind of very early morning one day in December, most likely.
Absolutely. There's also been an issue between the post Brexit with the UK GEOs or renewable energy guarantees, or REGOs as they're also called, and the import of exports. So import into the UK from the EU and export of REGOs to Europe. What's the situation here, Adam? I mean, is this going to come to an end now, or what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. So this was a consequence of the RED 2, which introduced a new element on Article 19 on guarantees of origin, which said that for a country to import its certificates into the EU, it had to have agreed a mutual recognition agreement with the EU on energy attribute certificates, of which GEOs is the European version, as you said, REGOs is the UK version. So that posed a problem for the UK when it became a third country dropping out of the European Union, that it was no longer able to export REGOs to the EU. Now, the market reality of this is that the UK exports maybe less than 10 terawatt hours of its REGOs to the EU, but it imports from the EU, depending on the year, 70 and a bit less terawatt hours. So a significant chunk of the UK renewable energy provision came from the EU. Now, the UK government took exception to not being able to export something that it was actually importing. It wanted, a balance of trade on that. Kind of as a point of principle. As I said, the actual volumes were very different, but as a point of principle, the UK didn't want to continue importing something it wasn't allowed to export. So as of the 1st of April next year, the UK government has said that it's no longer possible to import EU GOs to the UK. We've seen volumes dropping off kind of progressively, so the market has to some extent kind of priced in some of the effect, but there are still tens of terawatt hours of EU GOs going to the UK. And those will stop definitively as of the 1st of April. We will see what happens to the prices there. I mean, Leo can certainly talk to this in more detail than I can, but it will be something of an exercise in price elasticity for REGOs. Will corporates continue to buy if they're committed to buying renewable energy? Will households continue to buy, given that energy prices in general are very difficult for a lot of households? Where will the price get to? Will there be some people who just are not able to buy renewables because the volumes aren't there compared to the current demand in the UK? There's a lot to look at, and it's kind of a live experiment, but I'll let Leo go into more detail on that.
So Leo, some questions for you there in terms of the market impact of this sort of UK EU geo spat, or if we can call it that, disagreement on import and exports.
Yeah, well, like Adam mentioned, this new regulation will have quite a tremendous impact, even though we pretty much estimate that this new regulation has already priced in by market players. Just to come back on the imports from the UK of EU GEOs, this has been on a very positive and upwarding trend during the past few years. Like, for example, in 2016, 2017, it was only 20 terawatt hours, right, that were imported. And now, like Adam mentioned, it was last year almost 70 terawatt hours, mostly from Italy and Sweden and also Denmark. So we can try to assess both effects, right, on the UK market side and on the EU side. So on the UK market side, we expect that both the amount of REGO issuers and issuances will be significantly increasing, because the demand will remain as high as it is, but they will still lack 70 terawatt hours of EU GEOs that were imported in the past. And this is pretty much what we've been seeing, both on the EU GEO side and also on the REGOs side, that is the specific guarantees of origin name for UK production. And we saw weeks and months before this new regulation came into force, after a consultation held by BEIS, which is the department of the energy department of the UK government. And we saw that the REGO prices largely increased as some kind of anticipation of this new regulation. And this is also one market drivers, one factor amongst many others, and we cannot really see whether this new regulation played a key role in the upward trend for the EU geo side, at least. But on the UK side, at least, it had a tremendous impact, and we continue to see a rise in the REGO prices, both for this production year and for the next one. So I guess market participants are really aware of what's going on, and they didn't really wait for this new regulation to come into effect as of 1st of April 2023 to price this into the market.
But it'd be a clear incentive maybe to invest in renewable production in the UK if you can get this boosted in prices. A final question, really, gentlemen. I mean, I remember talking to you on the pod a couple of years ago, Adam, when the new Norwegian government was in place, and there were talks about Norway actually leaving the geo market. What's the current state of affairs there? I mean, it's gone a bit quiet. I seem to, I'll get the impression anyway.
Yeah, that's basically the impression we have too. We're kind of in a wait and see mode. You do hear. We keep an eye, obviously, on renewables policy in Norway because it's such a big part of the market with its Norwegian hydro geos. But it seems, like you say, that things have gone somewhat quiet. There's nothing definitive, certainly, and there are some positive signs. In Norway, Norwegian companies committing to buying geos to prove their renewable energy consumption as well, which is really a good sign. And I mean, I think from our perspective, it was one of those government policies, one of those election policies that looks easy on paper, and then when you look into the details, it suddenly looks much, much more difficult. Like I said, Norway is part of the European single market. It has to comply with EU law. Article 19 of the Red Directive stipulates that member states have to issue guarantees of origin for renewable energy. So to not do that would contravene EU law and could, have much more deeper consequences than just the geo market. So we don't see Norway wanting to kind of jeopardize its good standing in Europe at all just for geos. There are other things it could do, but we don't see any definitive action yet in other areas. So for now, it's wait and see, but things seem to be settled down, as you say.
What's your take on this situation, Leo?
Well, I guess like Adam mentioned, it's been an ongoing discussion or low-hanging fruit for the past 3 years since the Labour Party dropped this bomb in the media. And yeah, I think for now on, it's pretty blurry what's gonna happen in the few months, but it's been quite silent, at least on this side, and I'm not sure whether on the market side whether participants are really being afraid of this happening in the next month or years. But yeah, it would be quite dramatic if Norway would do that, since they account for like 22% of the geo that are produced every year in the AIB, and almost 1/3 of the hydro geos only. So this would be quite a huge shortage. But as Anna mentioned, there are a lot of barriers and things that prevent it to happen. So yeah, pretty confident on that side.
Gentlemen, that's all we have time for this week, but a fascinating discussion. Many more things I would have liked to have asked you guys, but we're unfortunately out of time. So thank you very much for being guests on the Montel Weekly Podcast.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Leo.
So listeners, you can now follow the podcast on our own Twitter account, aptly named the Montel Weekly Podcast. Please direct message any suggestions, questions, or let us know if you think you have a good idea for a guest on the show. You can also send us an email to podcast@montelnews.com. Lastly, remember to keep up to date with all that's happening in energy markets on Montel News. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you and goodbye.